Okay, number 3. A student measured the lengths of two worms. Worm S was 1/2 foot long. Worm T was 2/2 foot long. Which statement is true? We're going to compare fractions with like denominators, so they're already in the same terms. So let's look at some visuals and create some visuals. So let's go ahead and look at a bar graph here. So we're going to take this rectangle and we're going to call this rectangle 1 foot. And then we're going to create another diagram with our bars to compare these worms to see which of these are right. So let's go with worm S, and let's look at what worm S would look like on our bar. We've got them sit there in that second rectangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it into halves. We're going to cut this rectangle into 2 halves, will equal 1 foot. And then we'll go ahead and highlight 1/2 foot so we know exactly how long that worm is. So let's go ahead and compare it to the second worm, which would be worm T, in the same graph, so we can keep them in the same terms so we can really compare them really well. So worm T was 2 halves. So if worm S was 1/2, worm T would be 2 halves. So we're going to look at now we have our diagrams. We have a really good visual as to how long both these worms are. So let's go through our answer choices. Which statement is true? The length of worm S is greater than worm T. Well, S is smaller than T, so A does not work. Let's move on to B. The length of worm T is greater than the length of worm S. So we're looking at that one. Is the length of worm T is greater than the length of worm S? Yes, it is. So we can actually say that one is correct, but let's go through our other choices as well. The length C, the length of worm S is equal to the length of worm T. We can see in our graph very well that they are not equal at all, so C would not be correct. And moving on to D, there is not enough information to compare the lengths of the worms. Our picture gives us more than enough information to compare these worms. We know that worm T is actually double the size of worm S. So, which statement is true? B, the length of worm T is greater than the length of worm S.